So, you might ask, what's your basic email got to do with your overall marketing? The answer is not a whole lot, but that said, over the years we've seen tons of issues and tons of things that could have been really easily avoided by just getting a few things straight up front. With that in mind, let's jump in and have a quick look. All right, first let's have a look at why email is actually important in your business. First off, professional looking address is important on a branding perspective. Also, just simply making the right choice and getting a good email provider to make sure your email gets through, which is what's called deliverability. Filtering, your spam filter has to be set up in a way that makes sense for incoming emails. Some email providers have overly rigorous filtering, which causes emails not to get through, or rather for you not to see them, which isn't great. So you want something that makes sense on that front. And then basically just accessibility from the perspective of being able to get onto it anywhere at any time, efficiency in that it's got an efficient workflow and it's easy to find stuff, and then just reliability. Basically can't afford for your email to go down these days. From there, there's a bunch of options when you're picking email. First off, there are totally free options where you can do an unbranded email, like using Gmail or Outlook or iCloud. Unfortunately, with those, you can't use your domain name, so those aren't usually a good option. There's one or two free services, like Zoho is a good example, that provide decent services for branded emails so that you can use your domain name in your email. And there's a couple of services like that are decent, that are free. Typically, though, for a long-term business choice for your email, you'll probably want to use a branded email service like Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. They start about $6 a month, and it's well worth it. One thing I would say is in looking at picking an email provider, don't be swayed by introductory offers. There are companies that offer like cheap first year, but then they jack it up, and they know that you're going to be using the email for years and years. You should be aware of that as well. So don't worry about what the first year pricing is, but be really careful about what the long term pricing is. And for gosh sakes, don't use an old Hotmail address. And this may sound funny, but we actually see these pop up from time to time. It's like, oh, somebody's emailing from their firm on using wildcowboy439 at hotmail.com or something like that. Not a great professional impression, unless you're in an industry where people will find that funny and kind of retro. So in picking a vendor, kind of a first decision is whether you want just email or whether you want collaboration tools that include calendars, spreadsheets, storage, and word processing. Hint, you probably want the collaboration. And most businesses will benefit from tools like Google Workspace, Zoho, or Microsoft 365. In picking which of these suites you're going to use, you might consider which tools the majority of your clients are using if you engage with them, or possibly your suppliers or partners, because there's big issues around the collaboration and file sharing. Like if you're on Microsoft 365 and all your clients are on Google Workspace, it creates a huge pain in the butt. And mention too that the Zoho is not as widely used, although it's very cost effective and quite fully featured, and does have a free version for small businesses. That said, those tools don't really communicate with people that are on Microsoft or Google, so it's not always the perfect solution from that perspective. And I'll share that in our case, we use Google Workspace. I'm totally not a techie, but I've been using it for 15 years, and I'm like the person that set people up forever and managed any issues. And actually, that's kind of funny when I say manage any issues. Basically, for 15 years, I haven't managed any issues because it just works. And this goes back to when it was Google Suite, and we actually got it for free originally. In my case, I actually love the idea of Zoho. But it's just not practical for us given most of our clients use Google. So of course we couldn't collaborate with them if we did use that one. Of course, the question comes up, isn't it simpler to use my host for email? And yeah, it absolutely is, but likely you don't want to. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One reason is that much like domain registration, hosting is really transitory. Well, email is permanent. So if you have your email wrapped into a web host where your site is, and then you want to move platforms or move hosts, it becomes a real pain to migrate your email. Another thing is that the best WordPress hosts out there, they don't offer email. They just focus on the deliverability and the speed of the website. So they leave email totally separate because there's a whole different technology and a whole other bunch of problems that come with email. So and as well, platforms like Squarespace are in the same boat. They don't offer email, so you do need to pick your own email provider. And then this can be really painful, but some hosts and even a couple of big ones and big internet access providers, they outsource their email. They got brutal service, and their support and deliverability can be awful as well. So that's a situation you want to kind of avoid at all costs. And then lastly, couple things to note is that if you set up on something like Google Workspace, you can have multiple alias emails. So you can have like info at, like in my case, we only have a few, getting started, we only have a few email addresses for Google Workspace. We don't want to pay for a ton of extra ones, but you can have info at whatworks.marketing or admin at whatworks.marketing or sales at whatworks.marketing. You could have those all directed to the same person's email account, and then they can actually even answer from those emails. So there are great opportunities there. You don't need tons of extra email addresses. In fact, really, it's just figuring out who would be assigned to the individual aliases. One thing to note is you might need to explore authentication of your emails, which I won't get into now, but we'll talk about a bit more in other areas. If you're using WordPress or MailChimp or HubSpot and they're sending emails on your behalf, some email services will figure out that, hey, that's not actually the person sending that address. So what you need to do, and that can lead to deliverability problems. So you actually have to set up some authentication so that it's clear that that other place is authorized to send on your behalf. And for email marketing, you might also want to consider an entirely different domain for your marketing efforts. Great examples, I worked in a software company for a while. At that time, it was like 40 employees, and the entire company's email started getting blocked all over the place because one fellow in sales had sent a mail merge. That's an old an old Microsoft Office thing, by the way. But somebody had sent a mail merge through Excel to 200 people that were their contacts, and one or two of them had complained about it. As the email marketing guy, it actually got pinned on me, so I had to go and reverse engineer this and figure out what had happened, and found a spam complaint on one of these blacklists that related to his email. But basically, we hear about this quite often, is if you do email marketing, sooner or later, even if you're doing it totally responsibly, somebody's going to complain about it and file a spam complaint. And in that case, that puts your entire company's email deliverability at risk. I don't want to overstate that because that doesn't happen all the time. But if you are doing a bunch of email marketing, you definitely might want to consider a separate domain. So for example, if our corporate email was like Robert at whatworks.marketing, that's not my email address, by the way. But so we might use whatworks.marketing for that. And then we might use like newsletter at whatworks.info. And then if there was ever a complaint, then whatworks.info is the domain that would appear in the blacklist and have the issues rather than the .marketing one. Also, a real important point is get an admin Gmail. It's pretty much mandatory to use a bunch of the different Google tools like Google Analytics. You might use Google Ads. You should use Google Search Console, and you probably use YouTube for some of your marketing. So what you really want is to set up one administrative Gmail account that is used to register all those different accounts so that you always know how to access them and that they're easily connected to each other through that one address. That will make your life way simpler over time. And then you can simply assign admin access to other people to those different properties as needed. But having them all under one administrative Gmail, you definitely want to do that. So with that said, I hope that helps in terms of clarifying a couple things about email.